the night. The air smelled faintly of rain and rust. I didn't ask many questions. It was just a temporary position caretaker of the old Halebridge Cemetery. The pay was better than most night shifts, and the posting claimed it would be quiet work. Quiet. I've never hated a word so much. Halebridge lay 2 miles from the nearest town, surrounded by crooked iron gates that screeched whenever the wind breathed on them. The graves were older than memory itself, the oldest headstones tilted, like loose teeth, names half-erased by time. The man who hired me, Mr. Carter, was a rail-thin figure, with a face that looked stretched too tightly over his bones. He handed me a keyring without looking me in the eye. "You lock the gates at sunset," he said, "and you unlock them at sunrise. In between, you make sure no one comes in." "No one?" I asked, trying to sound casual. His voice dropped. "No one comes in, and nothing leaves." I laughed nervously, thinking it was just a dark joke. He didn't laugh back. The first few nights were uneventful. I brought a thermos of coffee, my phone, and a flashlight that always seemed too dim for the darkness that lived there. But by the 4th night, the quiet wasn't comforting, it was oppressive. Every sound felt amplified. The creak of old trees, the sigh of the wind, the distant rustle that could have been leaves or footsteps. Around midnight, I heard it for the first time, a faint tapping. It came from somewhere deep among the graves. Tap, tap, pause, tap. I told myself it was just a branch. But when I shined my flashlight in that direction, the beam fell on a small gravestone I hadn't noticed before. It was new, pristine marble, and my own name carved on it. My breath caught in my throat. I stumbled back, my flashlight flickering wildly. When I looked again seconds later, the grave was gone. The patch of ground was empty, covered in brittle grass. I told myself I was tired, that my mind was playing tricks on me. On the 7th night, I woke in the caretaker's shack to the sound of the gates clanging open. My first thought was that vandals had broken in. I grabbed the flashlight and rushed out only to find the gates locked, unmoved, their chains cold beneath my hand. Then I heard it again, that tapping, closer this time. I followed the sound deeper into the cemetery. The night felt thick, heavy. My own footsteps sounded wrong, delayed, as if the earth was answering back a second too late. The tapping led me to the old mausoleum at the far end of the grounds. Its stone door was cracked open, just enough to see blackness yawning inside. Something wet glistened on the threshold. It looked like water at first, but when I crouched closer, my stomach turned. It was blood, thin, fresh rivulets trailing into the dark. Against every instinct screaming in my head, I shined my light inside. The beam caught on something that made my skin crawl. Coffins, at least a dozen, lined the walls, but their lids weren't closed. They were open, tilted back, empty. And on the far wall, something had been scratched into the stone. Not carved, scratched. Over and over again with such force that the grooves looked fresh. It was one word: stay. Then the tapping came again right behind me. I spun around, my flashlight trembling, but there was nothing there. Just the heavy air, thick with the smell of old earth. My pulse thundered in my ears. I backed away, stumbling out of the mausoleum, and slammed the door shut. That's when I heard the whisper, not from the building, from the ground beneath my feet. By the 10th night, I'd stopped sleeping. The whispers would come as soon as I closed my eyes, low and patient, threading through my skull like roots. Sometimes they'd say my name, sometimes they'd say hurry. I started finding graves I didn't recognize, fresh ones. No flowers, no markers, just disturbed soil, sometimes still damp. One morning I asked Mr. Carter about them. He didn't answer. He just looked at me with those pale, unblinking eyes and said, "You've lasted longer than most." I wanted to quit. God, I wanted to quit, but every time I thought about leaving, something stopped me, some gnawing certainty that the moment I left the cemetery, something would follow. On the 13th night, the tapping didn't stop. It grew louder, closer, until it was all around. Meet dozens of taps, hundreds, like skeletal fingers drumming on wood. The ground trembled faintly. I staggered to the gates, ready to throw them open and run, but the lock wouldn't turn. And then I saw them, figures, pale as bone, standing between the headstones. Dozens of them, some in rags, some naked, their eyes hollow, skin stretched thin over brittle frames. They didn't move like the living. They swayed slow, unnatural. One stepped forward, her jaw trembling as if it had forgotten how to move. Her voice was a cracked whisper. "Your shift is over." The others echoed it, a soft chorus, voices broken by the grave. "Your shift is over. Your shift is over. Your shift is over." I stumbled, pounding, but the ground felt soft beneath my boots like freshly turned soil, and then the earth opened. I woke up lying in the caretaker's shack. Morning light filtered through the dusty window. The gates were open. Mr. Carter stood in the doorway, looking almost disappointed. "You locked the gates late," he said simply, as if nothing had happened. He handed me a fresh set of keys. I opened my mouth to quit, to demand an explanation, but my voice wouldn't work. My throat felt dry, heavy. When I looked down, there was dirt under my fingernails, damp earth, and when I stepped outside, I saw it, a fresh grave near the edge of the cemetery. No flowers, no marker, just disturbed soil, and the faintest impression of my name carved into the stone that wasn't there the night before. I'm still here, every night, locking the gates, making sure no one comes in and nothing leaves. The fresh grave by the edge of the cemetery haunted me all day. I didn't touch it. I didn't dare. But the dirt under my fingernails wouldn't wash away. That night, the fog came early, so thick I could barely see the gates from the shack. I locked them as usual, my hands trembling on the cold iron, and for the first time, I thought I saw shapes inside the fog, faces, watching. When I turned, they were gone. I tried to distract myself by patrolling the grounds, sweeping my flashlight over the stones. Every night, I passed the same graves. Worn marble, eroded names, rusted angels, missing their wings. But that night, something had changed. Some stones looked newer, not just cleaned, but as if they'd been carved yesterday, and every new one had a name I recognized. They were the names of the previous caretakers. At first I thought it was a coincidence, but when I reached the farthest row and saw the last stone, my breath caught. The newest name wasn't weathered. The letters were sharp, fresh. My name. The date was tomorrow. I went straight to the shack and called Carter. He didn't answer, but 20 minutes later, his car pulled up. His headlights cut through the fog, illuminating the iron bars. When he stepped out, his face was calm, almost bored. "You've been wandering too deep," he said, as if it explained everything. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded. "Why is my name on a grave?" He studied me for a long moment, then sighed. "Do you know why this cemetery pays so well?" My pulse thudded in my ears. "Because nobody wants the job." He smiled faintly. "Because the cemetery is hungry, and someone has to feed it." I thought he was insane until the ground shuddered beneath us. The fog thickened, curling around my legs like cold fingers. From somewhere deep in the cemetery, I heard a sound I'll never forget. The sound of 100 coffins creaking open at once. Carter didn't flinch. "You think you lock the gates to keep people out," he said quietly. "You lock them to keep the dead in, but they get restless. They bargain." I wanted to run. My every instinct screamed to bolt for the gates. But Carter stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They always ask for the caretaker first." That night, I didn't sleep. The tapping started again, but this time, it wasn't in one place. It came from all directions. Tap, tap, tap. When I shined my flashlight toward the graves, I saw the earth shift. Not dramatically, just enough to know something was moving beneath. And then came the whispers. Not faint, this time. Loud, urgent. "Let us out. Your shift is over." I stumbled back, my chest tight, until my shoulder hit the door of the mausoleum. It was wide open. Inside, the coffins weren't empty anymore. Shapes lay inside, them pale, gaunt, eyes closed. At first, I thought they were corpses. But as my light passed over them, several turned their heads ever so slightly toward me. One figure at the far end sat up slowly, as if rising from a deep sleep. His eyes were pale, milky, but I knew that face. It was the caretaker who worked here before me. I'd seen his photo in the shack. His lips moved, dry and cracking, his voice nothing but a rasp. "You should have left when you saw the stone." I stumbled back, my flashlight shaking. "I can leave now," I said, though my voice was breaking. He gave a small, broken laugh. "No, you're part of the ground now." I ran. I don't remember much, just the rush of fog, the shifting earth, the pounding in my chest. When I reached the shack, Carter was there, sitting in my chair, sipping from my thermos, as if he'd been waiting. "You lasted longer than most," he said again. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed the keys, ready to unlock the gates myself, ready to force them open, but when I turned, they weren't there. In their place was a row of headstones, all of them with tomorrow's date, all of them with my name. That was 3 nights ago. I don't remember what happened between then and now. Sometimes I think I left. Sometimes I wake up in the shack, my clothes covered in soil. I don't remember touching. Carter doesn't come anymore. Maybe he doesn't need to. The tapping hasn't stopped. It's closer now. Sometimes, in the fog, I see pale faces just beyond the gates. And sometimes, when I pass the newest grave near the edge of the cemetery, I swear I see my own handprint pressed into the dirt. I lock the gates at sunset. I unlock them at sunrise, and I make sure no one comes in and nothing leaves. But the ground is getting restless again, and I think my shift is almost over.